Caleb Maddox dropped to his knees in the dirt and drove his fist into the ground so hard his knuckles split open. 30 days. They gave him 30 days to find a wife or lose every acre he'd bled for. 7 years of sweat, broken bones, and sleepless nights. Gone, unless he married a woman he'd never met. But the woman stepping off the stage in Dry River that morning wasn't looking for a husband. She was looking for a place where nobody knew her name, and she had no idea she was about to save a man who'd already given up on being saved. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me to the very end. This story will wreck you and put you back together again. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Caleb and Josie's story travels. Now, let's begin. The fist hit the porch post hard enough to crack the wood. Caleb Maddox stood there, blood running down his knuckles, staring at the document Judge Whitaker had left on his table like a death sentence wrapped in legal paper. 30 days. Marry or forfeit. 7 years of breaking his back on Blackstone Creek Ranch. The fencing, the wells, the barn he'd raised beam by beam with hands that still ached every winter. All of it reduced to a single ultimatum by politicians in Santa Fe who'd never touched a shovel. "You're bleeding on the deed," Elijah Pike said from the doorway. Caleb didn't look up. "I'm aware." Elijah was 60 years old, built like twisted rawhide, and had been working Blackstone Creek since the day Caleb had filed his claim. Former slave, former soldier, former everything. Now the closest thing Caleb had to family, though neither man would ever say that out loud. "Judge give you a timeline?" Elijah asked. 30 days. "For what?" "A wife." Elijah was quiet for a long beat. Then he pulled a tobacco pouch from his vest and began rolling the cigarette with fingers that never trembled. "Well," he said, "that's a problem." "That's one word for it." "What's the alternative?" "Lose the ranch. Land goes back to auction. 7 years. Just gone." Caleb finally looked up. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and right now they held the kind of fury that made smart men step back. "They can't do this, Elijah." They just did. Caleb pushed off the post and walked inside. The main room was spare. A stone fireplace, a table he'd built himself, 2 chairs, a rifle rack, and nothing on the walls. No photographs, no decorations, no evidence that anyone had ever tried to make this place anything more than functional. He poured whiskey into a tin cup and drank it standing. "You could fight it," Elijah said, following him in. "Get a lawyer from Albuquerque. Challenge the statute." "With what money? And how long would that take? 6 months? A year? They'll have auctioned this land before the first hearing." "Then you find a wife." Caleb laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "Just like that. Walk into town and pick one off the shelf. I didn't say it'd be dignified. I said it'd save the ranch. I'm not dragging some woman into this mess just to check a legal box." Elijah lit his cigarette, drew on it slow. "Pride's a luxury, son. You sure you can afford it?" The words landed like a punch. Caleb set down the cup and braced both hands on the table, head bowed, breathing hard. 7 years. He'd come to New Mexico Territory at 23, straight from 4 years of military service he never talked about. The things he'd seen, the things he'd done, in the cavalry, had left marks deeper than the scar running from his left temple to his jaw. He'd needed land the way a drowning man needs air, something solid, something that couldn't scream or bleed or haunt him at 3 in the morning. Blackstone Creek had been that salvation. 700 acres of high desert grassland, anchored by a creek that ran year-round. He'd built everything from nothing. Every fence post, every water trough, every nail in this roof. And now they wanted him to hand it over, because he didn't have a wife. "There's a woman," Elijah said carefully. Caleb's head came up. "Came in on yesterday's stage from back east. Boston, I heard. Staying at Lola's place in town. Lola says she's looking for work, but there ain't much for a single woman in Dry River." Why would a Boston woman come to Dry River, New Mexico? Reckon that's her business. But Lola says she's educated, practical, and not the fainting type. Elijah paused. Also says the town's already calling her an old maid. 27 and unmarried. Folks ain't kind about it. Folks ain't kind about anything. True enough. But a woman with no prospects and a man with no wife, that's what some people might call a solution. Some people might call it a disaster. Only one way to find out. Caleb stared at the wall. The whiskey burned in his stomach. The blood on his knuckles was starting to dry and crack. "What's her name?" he asked. "Josephine Callahan. Goes by Josie." Dry River wasn't much of a town. One main street, a general store, a saloon, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse on weekdays, and Lola Reyes's boarding house, which served the best food in the territory and the sharpest gossip. Caleb rode in at dawn, before the town had fully woken, hoping to avoid questions. He tied his horse outside Lola's place and stood on the porch for a full minute, hat in his hands, trying to figure out what a man was supposed to say in a situation like this. "Ma'am, I need a wife, for legal purposes. Interested?" He'd rather get shot. The door opened before he could knock. Lola Reyes stood there, arms crossed, dark eyes appraising. She was 45, sharp as a blade, and ran her business with the authority of a general. "Caleb Maddox," she said. "Heard the judge paid you a visit." "News travels. In Dry River, news don't travel. It gallops." She stepped aside. "She's in the kitchen. Hasn't eaten since yesterday because she's too proud to ask for credit and too broke to pay." That stopped him. "She's not eating? She's got maybe $2 to her name. Spent everything getting here. I've been slipping food into her room and pretending I made too much for the other guests. But the girl's sharp. She'll figure it out." Caleb reached into his pocket and put money on the counter. "Feed her. Whatever she wants. Don't tell her where it came from." Lola took the money, and something shifted in her expression. "Kitchen's through there. And Caleb, be decent. She's had enough rough handling from this world." He walked through the narrow hallway and stopped in the kitchen doorway. She was sitting at the small table by the window, a medical book open in front of her, reading with a kind of concentration that blocked out the world. Her hair was reddish-brown, pinned up in a practical knot that was already losing strands. Freckles across her nose and cheeks. She wore a dress that had been mended at the elbows more than once, clean but faded. Her hands caught his attention first. They were wrapped around a cup of water. No coffee, no food on the table. And they were steady. Working hands. Capable hands. Then she looked up, and her eyes hit him like cold water. Green, clear, and completely unimpressed. "Can I help you?" she asked. Not hostile, not friendly, just direct. "Miss Callahan?" "Who's asking?" "Caleb Maddox. I own a ranch west of here." "I know who you are. Mrs. Reyes mentioned you might come." She closed her book, but kept one finger marking her page. "Sit down, Mr. Maddox. You look like a man about to deliver bad news, and I'd rather hear it sitting." He sat across from her, turning his hat in his hands. Up close, she wasn't what he'd expected. Not fragile, not meek, not desperate-looking. Tired, yes. Thin in a way that spoke of meals skipped, but her jaw was set, and her eyes were steady, and she held herself like a woman who'd been knocked down enough times to know exactly how to get back up. I'll be direct, Caleb said. I'd appreciate that. The territorial legislature passed a new settlement law. Landowners with claims over 500 acres need to establish a family household or forfeit. I've got 30 days. To find a wife? Yes, ma'am. Josie studied him for a long moment. And you're here because I'm the most convenient option? The bluntness caught him off guard. I'm here because I'm out of options, Miss Callahan. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. I appreciate the honesty. She leaned back in her chair. What are you offering? A home, security, your own space. The ranch house is large enough for separate quarters. And what do you expect in return? A legal marriage that satisfies the territorial requirement. Nothing more. Nothing more, she repeated, and something flickered in her eyes. Not hurt exactly, but a recognition of something familiar. Mr. Maddox, do you know why I came to New Mexico? No, ma'am. Because I'm 27 years old, unmarried, educated beyond what's considered appropriate for a woman, and trained in medicine I'm not allowed to practice. Back in Boston, I'm what they call a lost cause. Too old for a decent proposal, too opinionated for domestic service, too female for the profession I actually trained for. She held his gaze without flinching. I didn't come here to be someone's legal technicality. I'm not asking you to be. That's exactly what you're asking. Caleb set his hat on the table. Then what would it take to make this something you'd agree to? Josie was quiet for a moment. Then she unfolded her hands and placed them flat on the table, a gesture that looked like preparation for a negotiation. Partnership, she said. Not servitude, not decoration, not a name on a paper while you make all the decisions. If I agree to this, I come in as an equal, my name on the deed, my voice in decisions that affect the operation, my right to leave with fair resources if the arrangement fails. That's a lot of trust to ask from a stranger. You're asking me to marry you, Mr. Maddox. That's a lot of trust on both sides. He couldn't argue with that. And one more thing, Josie said. I want a trial period. 1 week on the ranch before any commitment. I need to see what I'm walking into, and you need to see whether you can tolerate a woman who doesn't know how to be quiet when she disagrees with something. For the first time, something close to a smile crossed Caleb's face. I reckon I can manage that. Don't be so sure. Josie stood, and he noticed she was tall, 5'7", maybe 5'8", and she moved with a quickness that suggested she wasn't the sitting still type. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning, first light. I'll be ready. Caleb stood as well. He extended his hand. She took it. Her grip was firm, her skin calloused in places he hadn't expected. Miss Callahan, I know this isn't what either of us planned, but I'll be straight with you. That ranch is everything I have. I'll do what it takes to keep it, and I'll treat you fair in the process. Fair is a good start, Mr. Maddox. She released his hand. But I'll warn you, I've been treated fair by people who meant tolerable. I'm not interested in tolerable. I'm interested in honest. I can do honest. Then we'll get along fine. Or we'll kill each other. Either way, it won't be boring. She turned back to her book, and Caleb found himself dismissed. He walked back through the hallway. Lola was waiting, arms still crossed, expression unreadable. Well, she asked. She's coming to the ranch tomorrow, trial week. Lola nodded slowly. You know what you're getting into. Not even a little. Good. That means you're paying attention. Lola uncrossed her arms. Caleb, that girl's been let down by every person who was supposed to protect her. Her father died. Her mother abandoned her to a stepfather who treated her like furniture. She came 2,000 miles on a hope and a prayer, and she's sitting in my kitchen pretending she's not hungry because she's too proud to admit she's got nothing left. Caleb thought of the money he'd left on the counter. She won't go hungry. Hungry isn't what I'm worried about. I'm worried about what happens when you get scared and push her away. Because that's what you do, Caleb. You push. And that girl's been pushed enough. The words stung because they were true. Caleb pulled his hat on and stepped off the porch. "First light," he said. "I'll be here." "I know you will." Lola watched him mount his horse. "The question is whether you'll still be there 6 months from now when it gets hard." Caleb rode out of Dry River without answering, because he didn't have an answer. The truth was, he didn't know if he could be what Josie Callahan needed. He didn't know if he could be what anyone needed. The last time he'd been responsible for other people's lives, he'd worn a cavalry uniform, and the results had given him nightmares he still couldn't shake. But the ranch, 7 years, every sunrise and blizzard and drought and broken bone, all of it concentrated in 700 acres of land that was the only good thing he'd ever built. He'd do whatever it took to keep it, even if that meant letting a stranger into the fortress he'd spent 7 years constructing. Even if that meant risking the one thing he feared more than losing his land, letting someone close enough to see what he really was. The ride back to Blackstone Creek took 2 hours. By the time he reached the property line, marked by a stack of stones he'd built his first week here, the sun was high and the heat was punishing. Elijah was waiting at the barn, brushing down a gelding with slow, methodical strokes. He didn't look up when Caleb dismounted. "She comin'?" Elijah asked. "Tomorrow, 1-week trial." "She agreeable?" Caleb unsaddled his horse and hung the tack on the rack. "She's something. I'm not sure agreeable is the word." "What word would you use?" Caleb thought about it, about those green eyes that didn't blink, about the medical book and the calloused hands, and the way she'd negotiated terms like a lawyer instead of accepting whatever he offered. "Dangerous," he said. Elijah finally looked at him. The old man's face creased into something that might have been a smile. "Good," he said. "You could use a little danger. Keep you honest." "I'm honest." "You're honest about the ranch, the horses, the fences. You're a damn liar about everything else, especially yourself." Elijah went back to brushing the horse. "But that's your business, for now." Caleb walked to the house and stood in the doorway, looking at the spare, empty rooms that had been his whole world for 7 years. Tomorrow, a stranger would walk through this door. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. A woman the world had called worthless and unwanted. And Caleb Maddox, scarred, haunted, and terrified of needing anyone, had just invited her into the only safe place he'd ever known. He poured himself another whiskey and sat alone at the table. 30 days to save his ranch. 1 week to decide if a stranger could be trusted. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice he couldn't silence. What if she sees what you really are? He drank the whiskey and waited for morning. She arrived before first light. Caleb had expected to wait. Figured a Boston woman would need coaxing out of bed, would fuss over trunks and hat boxes, and whatever else Eastern ladies couldn't live without. Instead, when he pulled the wagon up to Lola's boarding house, Josie Callahan was already sitting on the porch steps with 2 bags and a wooden crate packed tight with books. No hat boxes, no fussing, just a woman ready to go. "You're early," Caleb said. "So are you." She stood, brushed the dust off her skirt, and picked up both bags before he could offer to help. "The crate's heavy. I'll take the help on that one." He loaded the crate into the wagon bed. It weighed a good 40 pounds. "What's in here?" "Medical texts, surgical references, a pharmacopoeia my father compiled before he died." "You brought a library across the country." "I brought my education across the country, Mr. Maddox. It's the only thing nobody could take from me." They climbed onto the wagon bench. Lola appeared in the doorway, arms crossed in her usual stance, and gave Josie a look that held more tenderness than the older woman would ever admit. "You need anything, you send word," Lola said. "I mean it. I'll be fine." "I know you will. I'm telling you anyway." Josie nodded once, and Caleb clicked the horses forward. They rode in silence for the first 20 minutes, the wagon bouncing over rutted road, the morning still cool enough to be merciful. Josie sat straight-backed beside him, her eyes taking in everything without comment. "Ranch is about 2 hours out," Caleb offered. "I know. Mrs. Reyes told me." More silence. Caleb wasn't a talker on his best day, and this wasn't his best day. He'd slept maybe 2 hours, his mind grinding over every possible way this arrangement could go wrong. "Mr. Maddox?" "Yeah?" "You keep clenching your jaw like that. You'll crack a tooth." He forced his jaw to relax. "Habit." "Nervous habit or angry habit?"
Both.
Josie nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable answer. "I have a question, and I'd like an honest response." "Go ahead." "Why does a man who's had 7 years to marry choose to live alone until the law forces his hand?" The question landed harder than she probably intended. Or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. Caleb was starting to suspect this woman didn't do anything by accident. "Never saw the need," he said. "That's not honest. That's deflection." "You've known me 12 hours, Miss Callahan. And in those 12 hours, I've watched you pay for a stranger's meals without wanting credit. Ride 2 hours in the dark to ask for help you clearly hate asking for, and offer your home to a woman you don't know. That tells me you're not cold. So why alone?" Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "Some men are better off alone." "No man is better off alone. Some men are just more afraid of company." He didn't answer that. Josie didn't push, but the silence that followed was different. Charged, like the air before a thunderstorm, full of things unsaid. They reached Blackstone Creek just as the sun cleared the eastern ridge. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and waited for her reaction. Josie climbed down without assistance and stood there, hands on her hips. She turned a full circle, taking in the house, the barn, the corral, the land stretching out in every direction. "How many head of cattle?" she asked. 320, give or take. "Horses?" 15 working horses, 2 breeding mares. "Hands?" "Elijah, full-time. I hire seasonal for roundup." 1 full-time hand for 700 acres and 300 cattle. Josie turned to face him. "You're understaffed by half." "I manage." Managing and thriving are different things. The front door opened and Elijah stepped out, coffee cup in hand. He looked at Josie with the careful, measuring gaze of a man who'd learned to read people the hard way. "Miss Callahan," he said, "welcome to Blackstone Creek." "Mr. Pike, Mrs. Reyes speaks highly of you." "Lola speaks highly of very few people. You should be flattered she spoke of me at all." The faintest smile. "Your room's ready. End of the hall, east-facing window. Best light in the house." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank Caleb. He spent last night scrubbing that room like his life depended on it." Caleb shot Elijah a look that could have stripped paint. Elijah sipped his coffee with perfect innocence. Josie carried her own bags inside. Caleb followed with the book crate, setting it down in the room Elijah had mentioned. It was spare, but clean. A bed with a new quilt he'd borrowed from the storage trunk, a washstand, a small table, and a window that caught the morning sun. "This will do nicely," Josie said. "Thank you." Kitchens across the hall, privies out back. If you need anything, I'll find it myself, Mr. Maddox. I'm not a guest. I'm here to evaluate a partnership. That means seeing how things actually work, not how they look when you're trying to impress me. She was already unpacking books onto the small table, organizing them by some system only she understood. Caleb stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her settle into his home with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to make any space her own quickly, because she'd never been allowed to stay anywhere long. He left her to it. Outside, Elijah was leaning against the corral fence, still holding that coffee cup like a prop. "She's something," Elijah said. "She told me I'm understaffed by half. She's been here 5 minutes. She's right. I know she's right. That's the problem." Elijah chuckled, a rare sound from a man who'd spent most of his life having nothing to laugh about. "Problem ain't that she's right, son. Problem is, you're not used to anyone being around long enough to notice." 3 hours later, Josie found the sick cattle. She'd asked Caleb to walk her through the property. Not a grand tour, she specified, just the working parts. The barn, the feed stores, the water systems. She moved through each area with her hands behind her back, asking questions that were pointed and specific. How often do you rotate pastures? What's your protocol for sick animals? Where do you store veterinary supplies? Caleb answered everything, growing increasingly uncomfortable with how much her questions revealed about what he didn't know or hadn't considered. Then they reached the south pasture. 30 head of cattle grazed in the shallow valley near the creek, and Josie stopped walking. "How long have those 4 been like that?" she asked, pointing to a cluster near the water. "Like what?" "Look at them, Mr. Maddox. Really look." Caleb looked. 4 cows standing slightly apart from the rest, heads low, not grazing. He'd noticed they seemed sluggish the past week, but figured it was the heat. "They're tired. Summer heat does that." Josie was already moving toward them, her stride purposeful. She reached the nearest cow and ran her hands along its flank with a confidence that said she'd done this 100 times. "This animal has a fever," she said. "Feel here. The skin's hot, even accounting for the sun." Caleb put his hand where she indicated. She was right. "And look at the coat." Josie parted the hair along the cow's back. "See the roughness here? The patchy areas? This isn't heat stress. This is parasitic infection. Liver flukes, if I had to guess." "How would you know that?" "Because my father was a doctor who treated farmers' livestock when no veterinarian was available. And he taught me everything he knew." Josie moved to the second cow, checking it with the same practiced efficiency. "This one too. Same symptoms." "All 4? "Likely more. Liver flukes spread through contaminated water sources. If these 4 have it, any animal drinking from the same section of creek probably does too." Caleb felt cold despite the heat. Liver fluke infection could devastate a herd if it spread unchecked. He'd lost 12 head last summer to what he'd assumed was bad water or poor grazing. Now he wondered if the real cause had been under his nose the whole time. "Can you treat it?" he asked. Josie looked at him, and he saw the shift in her expression. The moment she realized he was asking for her expertise, not questioning it. "Yes, but I need supplies. Turpentine, raw linseed oil, salt, and if the general store carries it, iron sulfate. The treatment is simple, but needs to be administered consistently." "Make a list. I'll ride to town." "I'll come with you. I need to check what's available and calculate dosages based on the animal's weight." They rode to Dry River in half the time it had taken that morning, Caleb pushing the horses harder than he should have. At the general store, Josie moved through the narrow aisles with the same focused intensity she'd shown with the cattle, pulling items, checking labels, asking the shopkeeper questions he clearly couldn't answer. "You're Maddox's new, you're staying at the ranch?" The shopkeeper, a man named Harlan, asked with the clumsy curiosity of a small-town gossip. "I am," Josie said without looking up from the bottle of turpentine she was examining. Heard you're from back east. Boston. Long way from home. This is home now. She set the turpentine on the counter. Do you carry iron sulfate? Harlan blinked at the redirect. Got some in the back, mostly used for livestock deworming. I know. I'll take 2 pounds. Caleb paid for everything and loaded the wagon. As they pulled away from the store, he caught fragments of conversation from the men loitering on the porch. Words that made his hands tighten on the reins. Old maid. Desperate. Charity case. I can hear them, Josie said quietly. You don't need to pretend I can't. Doesn't bother you? It bothers me every single time. I've just had 27 years of practice not letting it show. She straightened her back. Sticks and stones, Mr. Maddox. That saying was invented by someone who never had to listen to it. Josie turned to look at him, something shifting in her expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. That's a kind thing to say, she said. It's a true thing. Back at the ranch, Josie went to work on the cattle. Caleb tried to help, but within 10 minutes it became clear that she knew what she was doing, and he was getting in her way. So he held the animals steady while she administered treatment, a mixture of turpentine and linseed oil, delivered with a steadiness of hand that made him understand why she'd wanted to be a doctor. You're good at this, he said, watching her work on the 3rd cow. My father used to say I had the hands for surgery and the stomach for battlefield medicine. He meant it as a compliment. Was he a good doctor? Josie's hands paused for just a moment. He was the best man I ever knew. He died when I was 14. Pneumonia. Quick and vicious. She resumed working. After that, everything fell apart. My mother remarried within the year. My stepfather decided that a girl who read medical textbooks was unnatural and possibly dangerous. He shipped me off to my aunt's house in Boston, like a piece of excess furniture. And your mother let him? My mother chose him over me. The words came out flat, practiced, like she'd said them enough times that the edges had worn smooth. But underneath, Caleb heard the blade. People make choices, Mr. Maddox. Sometimes they choose wrong. The trick is not letting their choices define the rest of your life. She finished with the 3rd cow and moved to the 4th. Caleb held the animal, watching Josie's face as she worked. The concentration, the competence, the absolute refusal to be anything less than excellent at what she did. My mother died when I was 12, Caleb said. Josie's eyes flicked to his face, but her hands didn't stop. My father drank himself to death by the time I was 16. Lost everything first. The farm, the savings, the dignity. I watched him dissolve one bottle at a time. Is that why you don't finish the whiskey? He stared at her. How did you... The bottle on your kitchen shelf. It's 3/4 full, and the dust pattern says it's been sitting there for months. You pour, but you don't drink much. She finished with the last cow and wiped her hands on a cloth. You're afraid of becoming him. Nobody had ever said that to him. Not Elijah, who knew him better than anyone. Not the men he'd served with. Not a single soul in 7 years of living in this territory. And this woman he'd known for 16 hours said it like she was reading the weather. Yes, Caleb said. I'm afraid of becoming him. Josie nodded. No pity, no reassurance, no empty words about how he was nothing like his father. Just acknowledgement. Fear of becoming someone isn't the same as becoming them, she said. The fact that you're afraid means you're paying attention. She gathered her supplies and walked toward the house. Caleb stood in the pasture with 4 treated cattle and the unsettling realization that Josie Callahan could see right through him. It should have terrified him. It did terrify him. But underneath the terror was something he hadn't felt in so long he almost didn't recognize it. Relief. That evening, Elijah found Caleb sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. She found the sick cattle, Elijah said. It wasn't a question. 4 confirmed, probably more. Liver flukes. Elijah sat down beside him. I've been suspicious about those animals for 2 weeks. Was going to mention it. Why didn't you? Because you don't like hearing problems you can't fix by yourself. Figured I'd wait until one of them dropped dead and then say I told you so. Elijah pulled out his tobacco. She fixed them? Working on it. She knows what she's doing. I know. I watched her for 20 minutes before you two came back from the pasture. That woman's got a gift. She's got more than that. She's got opinions, demands, conditions, and a way of looking at you that makes you feel like she's reading your mail. And that scares you. Damn right it does. Elijah lit his cigarette and smoked in silence for a while. The sun was going down, painting everything gold. You know what scares me? Elijah said finally. What? The idea that you'll find every excuse in the world to push that woman away, because letting her stay means letting her matter. And you've convinced yourself that nothing's allowed to matter except this dirt. The dirt doesn't leave. The dirt doesn't love you back either. Elijah stood, knees popping. I'm turning in. Think about what I said. Or don't. Your call. He went inside. Caleb sat alone in the gathering dark. From inside the house, he could hear Josie moving in the kitchen. She'd found the cast-iron skillet and the meager supplies he kept stocked. Something was cooking. Something that smelled better than anything he'd produced from that kitchen in 7 years. After a while, the door opened. Mr. Maddox. Yeah? I made dinner. There's enough for 2 if you're hungry. He turned. She was standing in the doorway, backlit by lamplight, and she had a streak of flour on her cheek, and she looked tired and real, and completely unaware of how the light caught the red in her hair. I'm hungry, Caleb said. He went inside. The table was set for 2. His mismatched plates, his dented forks, but arranged with a care he'd never bothered with. She'd made stew from the salted beef and potatoes in his stores, and cornbread that smelled like someone's grandmother's kitchen. They ate in silence that was somehow not awkward. Josie ate like someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days, which, Caleb realized, she probably hadn't, no matter what Lola had managed to slip her. When's the last time you ate? He asked. This morning, Lola insisted. Before that? Josie set down her fork. Tuesday. Today was Friday. 3 days. Why didn't you say something? Because I didn't come here to be fed out of pity, Mr. Maddox. I came here to prove I'm worth keeping. The words hit him somewhere deep. Worth keeping. Like she was something a person might decide to throw away. You treated 4 sick cattle in one afternoon that I didn't even know were sick, Caleb said. You identified a problem that could have killed half my herd. You rode to town, got supplies, and administered treatment like a trained veterinarian. He held her gaze. You've been here 1 day, Miss Callahan. You've already proven more than enough. Something moved across Josie's face, fast, barely visible, like a crack in a dam she'd spent years building. Then she pressed her lips together, picked up her fork, and went back to eating. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me for stating facts. She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. And Caleb felt that almost smile in his chest like a second heartbeat. After dinner, she washed the dishes. He dried. Neither spoke. They worked side by side in the small kitchen, their elbows nearly touching, falling into a rhythm that had no right to feel so natural after 1 day. When the last dish was put away, Josie dried her hands and turned to face him. Day 1, she said. 6 to go. What's your verdict so far? The ranch is underperforming, but has excellent potential. The cattle need immediate veterinary attention. The operation needs at least 2 more permanent hands. The kitchen is criminal. And the man who built all of this is stubbornly determined to do everything alone, even when it's killing him. That's a hell of a review. You asked. She folded the dish towel and set it on the counter. Good night, Mr. Maddox. Caleb. She paused in the doorway. If we're going to do this trial week, he said, you might as well call me Caleb. She considered this. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Josie. She disappeared down the hall. Her door closed with a soft click. Caleb stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of cornbread and stew, and something else. Something that smelled like possibility, though he'd never admit that out loud. He checked the locks, banked the fire, and went to his own room. As he lay in the dark, he heard a sound from down the hall that stopped his breath. Josie was crying. Quiet, muffled. The kind of crying a person did when they'd spent years making sure nobody heard. The kind that came from exhaustion and relief and the overwhelming experience of being somewhere safe after too long spent somewhere that wasn't. Caleb stared at the ceiling and listened and felt something crack open inside his chest that he'd spent 7 years sealing shut. He didn't go to her. She hadn't asked for comfort, and she wouldn't want him to know. But he lay awake until the crying stopped and her breathing evened into sleep, keeping vigil through the wall like a sentry who'd found something worth guarding and didn't yet know how to say so. By the 4th morning, Caleb caught himself listening for her. Not consciously, not intentionally, but somewhere between sleep and waking, his ears searched for the sounds that had become the new rhythm of his house. The creak of her bedroom door, the soft pad of her feet on the floorboards, the strike of a match as she lit the stove. Sounds that meant he wasn't alone. Sounds that scared him more than any gunshot ever had. He found her in the barn before sunrise, crouched beside the bay mare he'd bought at auction 2 months ago. The horse had been off her feed for days. Caleb had figured she was adjusting to new surroundings. She's pregnant, Josie said, without looking up. Her hand was pressed flat against the mare's belly, her head tilted like she was listening to something only she could hear. She can't be. I bought her as a maiden mare. Then you were lied to. She's at least 4 months along. Feel here. Caleb knelt beside her and placed his hand where she guided it. Beneath the warm hide, something shifted, subtle but unmistakable. I'll be damned, he whispered. You'll be a horse breeder. Josie stood, brushing straw from her skirt. She's healthy. The foal should be strong if we manage her nutrition properly. But she needs better feed than what you're giving her. More grain, less rough hay, and access to mineral supplements. How do you know all this? My father delivered a foal when I was 9. He talked me through every step because he believed knowledge shouldn't be kept from anyone willing to learn. Josie wiped her hands on her apron. Breakfast is on the stove. You haven't eaten yet. How do you know I haven't eaten? Because you never eat before you check the horses. You've done it every morning since I arrived. You think I haven't noticed? She walked out of the barn, and Caleb stayed where he was for a moment, his hands still on the mare's side, trying to process the fact that Josie Callahan had memorized his routines in 4 days. Nobody paid that kind of attention. Not unless they were studying you, or caring about you. And he didn't know which possibility frightened him more. Breakfast was eggs. The first fresh eggs from the 6 hens Josie had persuaded him to buy from a rancher passing through town on day 2. She'd traded her own labor for them, helping the rancher set a dislocated finger in exchange for the chickens and a small coop he'd had loaded on his wagon. You traded medical services for poultry, Caleb had said at the time, not quite believing it. I traded what I have for what we need. That's economics, Caleb. Now those chickens were producing, and the kitchen smelled like something from a life Caleb had stopped believing was possible. He sat at the table and ate while Josie reviewed the treatment log she'd been keeping for the cattle. 2 more showing symptoms, she said, turning a page. But the original 4 are improving. Another week of treatment, and they should be clear. Josie, she looked up. Thank you. For the cattle, the chickens, the food, all of it. You're welcome. She held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary. But you don't owe me gratitude, Caleb. I'm not doing this for thanks. I'm doing it because this is what partnership looks like. The word partnership sat between them on the table, heavy and loaded. Day 4, Caleb said. 3 more days. I know how to count. Have you decided anything? Josie closed the log. Have you? He didn't answer. She didn't push. They finished breakfast in a silence that held more conversation than most people's marriages. That afternoon, Wade Sutter rode in. Caleb heard the horse before he saw the rider and stepped out of the barn with his hand instinctively resting near his hip. Old habit from the cavalry, the kind that never really left. Wade Sutter was 35, handsome in a sharp-edged way, with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been told no. He owned the next ranch over, a bigger spread, more cattle, more hands. And he'd been trying to buy Blackstone Creek for 3 years. Always friendly about it, always smiling, always making it sound like he was doing Caleb a favor. Caleb! Wade swung down from his horse with the loose-limbed grace of someone born in the saddle. Heard you had some excitement with the territorial court. News gets around. It does in these parts. Wade looped his reins over the fence post and walked up like he owned the place. Shame about the new law. Damn politicians don't understand what it takes to run a ranch. Something we agree on. Listen, I wanted you to know. If things don't work out with the marriage requirement, my offer still stands. Fair price for the land. You'd walk away with enough to start fresh somewhere else. I'm not selling, Wade. Course not. Just wanted you to know the option's there. Wade's eyes drifted past Caleb toward the house. I also heard you've got a visitor. Lady from back east? That's my business. Sure. But Wade was already looking at the improvements. The chicken coop, the reorganized feed storage, the treated cattle grazing healthily in the near pasture. His smile didn't change, but something behind his eyes hardened. You've been busy. The front door opened and Josie stepped out. She'd been cataloging the medical supplies in the storage room. She was always cataloging something. And she walked onto the porch with a ledger under her arm and her reading glasses pushed up into her hair. Caleb, do we have a visitor? She asked, her tone neutral but alert. Wade Sutter, neighbor to the south. Wade pulled off his hat and turned his full charm on Josie. Ma'am, welcome to the territory. Wade Sutter. I run the double S spread just over that ridge. Anything you need, don't hesitate. Josephine Callahan. Josie's handshake was brief and businesslike. Kind of you to offer. We look out for each other here. That's how it works when you're miles from the nearest town. Wade leaned against the fence, relaxed and amiable. So what brings you all the way from Boston, was it? It was. Long way from home. People keep saying that. Because it's true. Wade's smile widened. Must be something special about Blackstone Creek to pull a lady across the whole country. The ranch has potential, Josie said. That's enough. Wade nodded slowly, his eyes flicking between Josie and Caleb in a way that was calculating beneath the friendliness. Well, I won't keep you. Just wanted to stop by, say welcome, and let Caleb know that if the deadline gets tight and he needs help, any kind of help, I'm right next door. Appreciated, Caleb said, in a tone that meant the opposite. Wade mounted his horse, tipped his hat to Josie, and rode off. Caleb watched him go, his jaw doing that clenching thing Josie had called him on during their first ride. You don't like him, Josie said. He's been trying to buy this ranch for 3 years. Always friendly, always helpful, always circling, like a vulture waiting for something to die. Caleb looked at her sharply. That's exactly what I was thinking.
He looked at your improvements like they were a personal insult, Josie said.
A man who wants to help his neighbor doesn't inventory his progress. She tapped the ledger against her leg. How well do you know his operation? Well enough. Big spread, 50 hands, more money than sense. Does he run cattle through the canyons south of your property? Sometimes. We share a stretch of open range. Then he has access to your fence lines. Caleb went still. What are you saying? I'm not saying anything yet. I'm asking questions. Josie turned and walked back inside, leaving Caleb standing in the yard with a suspicion that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago and now wouldn't stop growing. Elijah appeared from the barn, where Caleb had no doubt he'd been listening to every word. She's sharp, Elijah said. She thinks Wade might be connected to the missing cattle. She might be right. You've never trusted Wade. I've never trusted any man who smiles that much. Ain't natural. Elijah spat into the dirt. But suspicion ain't evidence, and accusing your only neighbor of theft without proof is a good way to start a range war. So what do I do? What she said. Ask questions. Watch. Pay attention. Elijah paused. And maybe consider that the woman you brought here to solve a legal problem is solving a lot more than that. On the 5th morning, Josie asked to ride the fence lines. Caleb saddled 2 horses, and they headed south, following the boundary of Blackstone Creek, where it bordered Wade Sutter's double S spread. Josie rode well. She hadn't exaggerated about her grandfather's farm. And she kept pace without complaint despite the heat. They rode for 2 hours, checking posts and wire. Josie stopped frequently, dismounting to examine sections more closely. She ran her hands along the wire with the same careful attention she gave to sick cattle, reading the fence the way she read everything, like it was a patient with symptoms that told a story. Here, she said, kneeling beside a post near the creek crossing. Caleb dismounted. The fence looked intact to him. Look at the wire tension, Josie said. This section and the sections on either side. See the difference? He looked more carefully. She was right. The wire on this section was slightly tighter, newer looking, the weathering pattern different from the posts beside it. Someone's replaced this wire, he said. Recently, within the last month. Josie pointed to the ground. And there are cattle tracks here that cross the fence line, but no break in the wire that would explain how they got through. Somebody cut it, drove cattle through, then repaired it. With wire that almost matches, but not quite. They're good, but not perfect. Caleb felt the familiar cold burn of anger in his gut. How many head? I'd need to do a full count, but based on the tracks, at least 20, maybe more. 20 head. At current prices, that was a small fortune, months of profit, gone. Caleb, Josie's voice was careful. The repair work is skilled. Whoever did this knows fencing, knows your property, knows your patterns well enough to pick a section you don't check frequently. You think it's Wade? I think whoever is doing this has access, knowledge, and motive. Wade Sutter has all 3. She stood, brushing dirt from her knees. But I also think accusing a powerful neighbor without proof would be reckless. We need more. What do you suggest? We document everything. Every fence section, every repair discrepancy, every cattle count. We create a map of where losses are concentrated and compare it to access points from the double S. And we do it quietly, without tipping anyone off. Caleb stared at her. You've done this before. I've dealt with people who smile to your face while taking what's yours. The specifics are different. The strategy is the same. Trust evidence, not emotion. They spent the rest of the day riding every inch of Blackstone Creek's southern boundary. Josie filled 6 pages of her notebook with observations. Wire conditions, track patterns, terrain features that would facilitate or hinder cattle movement. By the time they rode back to the ranch, the sun was low and they were both exhausted. But they had something they hadn't had before. A clear picture of systematic theft, concentrated along the boundary with Wade Sutter's property, executed by someone with intimate knowledge of Caleb's operation. "I'm going to kill him," Caleb said quietly as they unsaddled the horses. "You're going to prove it," Josie corrected, "and then the law is going to handle it. Killing him makes you a murderer. Evidence makes him a thief." "Evidence takes time."
Justice usually does. Josie hung her saddle on the rack and turned to face him. "Caleb, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. Someone is stealing from you on your own land. That's a violation that goes deeper than money. But charging over to the Double S with a rifle is exactly what a man like Wade wants. It gives him the excuse to paint you as dangerous, unstable, unfit to hold your claim."
"So, I do nothing?"
"You do everything. Just quietly."
She put her hand on his arm, the first time she'd voluntarily touched him, and the contact sent a jolt through his body that he felt in his teeth. "We build the case. We find irrefutable proof. And then we take it to the territorial marshal and let the law do what the law is supposed to do." Her hand was still on his arm, warm, steady, certain. Caleb looked down at it, then up at her face. "You keep saying, 'we,'" he said. "I do." "Trial period's not over yet. You haven't committed to anything." Josie's jaw tightened. She pulled her hand back.
"You're right, I haven't."
She turned and walked toward the house. Caleb cursed himself silently. Every time she moved closer, he found a way to remind them both of the distance. Elijah materialized from wherever Elijah always materialized from. "I heard that," the old man said. "You hear everything." "Because you say stupid things loud enough to carry." Elijah shook his head. "That woman just spent her entire day helping you document theft on a ranch she doesn't legally own. And you thanked her by reminding her she's on a trial period? Like she's livestock you haven't decided to keep." "That's not what I meant." "It's what she heard." Caleb closed his eyes. "I know." "Then fix it, before she decides the smartest thing she ever did was get back on that stage." Caleb found Josie in the kitchen. She was chopping potatoes with a force that suggested she was imagining they were something else. Her back was to him, rigid with an anger she was channeling into meal preparation. "Josie." The knife didn't stop. "I'm sorry." "For which part?" "For reminding you of the trial period. For making it sound like you haven't already done more for this ranch in 5 days than anyone's done in 7 years. The knife paused. Josie set it down, but she didn't turn around. "I know what I'm doing here, Caleb. I'm not confused about the arrangement or the timeline or the terms we agreed to. But when I spend an entire day writing fence lines and documenting evidence of theft, when I find your sick cattle, fix your books, feed you proper meals, and treat your pregnant mare, I'm not doing it as a trial. I'm doing it because it matters. Because the work matters. Because—" her voice hitched, just barely. "Because this place could be something extraordinary if someone cared about it the way it deserves." She turned around. Her eyes were bright, but she wasn't crying. She was too angry to cry. "I've spent my entire life being evaluated," she said, "being measured and tested and found insufficient, too old, too smart, too independent, too much. I will not spend another minute of my life on trial for a man who can't decide whether I'm worth keeping." The words hit like a fist. "You're not on trial," Caleb said, his voice rough. "Then stop treating me like I am." Silence. The kitchen felt too small. The air felt too thin. "The trial period was my idea," Josie continued, her voice steadier now. "I suggested it because I needed to see the ranch, the work, the life. I've seen it. I don't need 3 more days to know what I think." Caleb's heart was hammering. "What do you think?" "I think this ranch is worth fighting for. I think the cattle operation has real potential. I think the theft problem is solvable with patience and evidence. I think Elijah is the best man on this property, and you don't deserve him." "And me?" Josie held his gaze. "I think you're the most stubborn, infuriating, emotionally fortified man I've ever met. I think you built this ranch as a wall between yourself and the rest of the world, and you're terrified of anyone getting close enough to see what's behind it." "What's behind it?" "A good man." Her voice dropped. "A good man who doesn't believe he deserves anything good." Caleb couldn't breathe. "I also think," Josie said, picking the knife back up and returning to the potatoes, "that if you apologize to me one more time without actually changing anything, I'll use this knife for something other than vegetables." Despite everything, the anger, the fear, the ache in his chest, Caleb almost laughed. "Fair enough," he said. "Set the table. Dinner in 20 minutes." He set the table. 3 places because Elijah ate with them now. Josie had insisted on day 2, and Elijah had accepted with a dignity that made Caleb realize the old man had been eating alone in the bunkhouse for 7 years and never once complained about it. Dinner was quiet. Josie's anger had cooled into something harder to read. Elijah watched them both with a patient expression of a man observing 2 people too proud to say what they meant. After the dishes, Josie retreated to her room. Caleb sat on the porch. Elijah joined him. "She giving you another chance?" Elijah asked. "I think so. Hard to tell." "She's still here. That tells you something." "Tells me she's stubborn." "Tells me she sees something worth staying for." Elijah smoked in silence for a while. "You know, I was married once, before the war. Her name was Ruth. They sold her away from me when I was 22. Never saw her again." Caleb turned. In 7 years, Elijah had never spoken about his life before freedom. "I spent 30 years after that convincing myself I was better off alone," Elijah continued. "That losing someone was worse than never having someone. That if I never loved again, I'd never hurt again." He tapped ash from his cigarette. "I was wrong, Caleb. I was wrong about all of it. The not having hurt worse than the losing ever could. Because at least losing means you had something worth grieving. The not having is just empty." Caleb stared into the darkness. "That woman in there is offering you something most men never get," Elijah said. "Not just a partnership, not just a solution to your legal problem. She's offering to see you, the real you, scars and nightmares and all." He stood, joints popping. "Don't you dare waste that because you're too afraid to let her." Elijah went to the bunkhouse. Caleb sat alone. Inside the house, Josie's lamp was still burning. He could see the glow under her door, imagined her reading one of her father's medical books, those green eyes moving across pages of knowledge that nobody would let her use because she'd been born the wrong gender in the wrong century. He stood, walked to her door, raised his fist to knock. Stopped. What would he say? That she was right about him? That he was terrified? That 5 days of her presence had done more damage to his defenses than 7 years of solitude had built? He lowered his hand. Then he heard her voice through the door. Quiet. Not talking to him. "Mr. President, if you shed on that book, I will never forgive you." A small, indignant meow. Caleb pressed his forehead against the doorframe and closed his eyes. She was talking to the scrawny orange tabby she'd found under the porch on day 2, and named with the most absurd seriousness he'd ever witnessed. "I know you don't care about pharmacology," Josie continued through the door, "but some of us are trying to improve ourselves." Another meow, this one more demanding. "Fine, you can sleep on the pillow, but only because you're the only male in this house who doesn't make everything complicated." Caleb pressed his hand flat against the door. On the other side, a woman who'd been rejected by everyone she'd ever trusted was talking to a stray cat, because it was safer than talking to him. And he was standing in the hallway like a coward, because knocking on that door meant admitting that Josie Callahan had gotten past every wall he'd ever built. 5 days. That's all it had taken. He went to his own room, lay in the dark, listened to the silence. Tomorrow was day 6. The day after that, the trial ended. And Caleb Maddox had to decide what terrified him more: letting Josie Callahan into his life or watching her walk out of it. He already knew the answer. He'd known it since she put her hand on his arm at the fence line and said, "We," like it was the most natural word in the world. But knowing and acting were different things, and the distance between them was exactly the width of a hallway and the lifetime of learning not to need anyone. Day 6 started with blood. Caleb woke to Elijah pounding on his door before dawn, the old man's voice tight in a way Caleb had never heard in 7 years. "Get up! Now! Barn!" Caleb was dressed and moving in 30 seconds. Josie's door was already open, her room empty. He found her in the barn, kneeling beside the bay mare, the pregnant one she discovered 4 days ago. The horse was down, breathing hard, blood on the straw beneath her. "She's losing the foal," Josie said without looking up. Her hands were already working, pressing against the mare's abdomen, checking for positioning. "Something's wrong. The foal's turned. I can feel it. If we don't reposition, we'll lose them both. Can you do it?" Josie's eyes met his, green, fierce, absolutely focused. "I've watched my father do it twice. I've read the procedure 100 times. I've never done it myself." "That's not what I asked." "Yes, I can do it. Tell me what you need." "Hot water, clean rags, rope, and both of you holding her steady. She's going to fight." The next hour was controlled chaos. Elijah held the mare's head, speaking low and constant in a voice that seemed to reach somewhere deep inside the animal's panic. Caleb held her body, using every pound of his strength to keep her still while Josie worked. She'd rolled her sleeves past her elbows. Her arms were slick with blood up to the shoulder. Her face was a mask of concentration so intense it seemed to bend the air around her. "I've got the foal," she said through gritted teeth. "It's turned sideways. I need to rotate. Caleb, hold her. Hold her. She's going to kick." The mare thrashed. Caleb threw his weight across her flank. Elijah pressed down on her neck, murmuring words in a language Caleb didn't recognize. "Almost. There. There. I've got it turned." Josie's breathing was ragged. "Now I need to pull. Slowly. If I tear anything, you won't," Caleb said. She looked at him. Just for a second. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with horses or medicine. Then she pulled. The foal came into the world wet and struggling, all legs and fight, and the mare's breathing changed from panicked to exhausted. Josie caught the foal, cleared its airways with her fingers, and laid it on clean straw beside its mother. "Breathe," she whispered to it. "Come on, breathe." The foal shuddered, coughed, drew its first real breath with a sound like a gasp. Josie sat back on her heels, covered in blood and sweat and straw, and laughed. A short, disbelieving, triumphant laugh that cracked something open in Caleb's chest. "He's alive," she said. "A colt! He's alive!" Elijah released the mare's head and sat down hard, his age showing for the first time. "Lord have mercy," he breathed. Caleb couldn't speak. He was staring at Josie, this woman who'd saved 2 lives with her bare hands and her father's knowledge, and a courage that most men he'd known in the cavalry couldn't match. "You're shaking," he said. Josie looked at her hands. They were trembling violently. "Adrenaline," she said. "It'll pass." Without thinking, Caleb took her hands in his, both of them, blood and all. He held them steady between his own and didn't let go until the trembling stopped. Josie stared at their joined hands. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with something more than the aftermath of crisis. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You just saved my horse, and her foal. I should be thanking you." "I meant thank you for trusting me to do it." The words landed somewhere deep. Caleb released her hands slowly, and the absence of contact felt like stepping out of warm shelter into cold wind. "Always," he said, and meant it in a way that went far beyond horses. They cleaned up in silence, working side by side with the ease of people who'd been through something together that words couldn't adequately capture. Josie checked the mare and foal 3 more times before she was satisfied, making notes in her ever-present log with hands that had stopped shaking. Elijah made breakfast. It was terrible. The old man could build a fence in his sleep, but couldn't boil water without burning it. And they ate every bite because none of them wanted to break the strange, fragile closeness the morning had created. "Day 6, Elijah said, pushing his plate back. "1 more day in the trial." "Thank you for the reminder," Caleb muttered. "Somebody's got to keep count. You 2 are too busy dancing around each other to remember what day it is." Elijah stood, took his plate to the basin, and walked out without further comment. Josie watched him go with a ghost of a smile. "He's not subtle." "He's never been subtle. He just usually aims it at me." "He aims it at you because he loves you." The word dropped between them like a stone in still water. "Elijah doesn't... We're not... He raised you, Caleb. Maybe not by blood, maybe not officially, but he's been here since the beginning. He stayed when he could have gone anywhere. He worries about you. He pushes you to be better. That's love, whether either of you admits it or not." Caleb opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I never thought of it that way." "I know you didn't. That's part of the problem." Josie picked up her plate. "You're so convinced nobody cares about you that you can't see it when they do." She went to wash dishes. Caleb sat at the table, her words ringing in his ears like a bell that wouldn't stop. By mid-morning, he needed air, needed space, needed to think without Josie's green eyes making every thought harder and clearer at the same time. He saddled Chance and rode south, telling himself he was checking the fence sections they'd documented, telling himself it was about the cattle, knowing it was about running, the way he always ran when someone got too close. 2 miles from the ranch, he found the proof Josie had predicted. 3 men on horseback, working a gap in the fence line, herding Blackstone Creek cattle through the opening, with practiced efficiency. They hadn't seen him. The wind was in his favor, and the terrain gave him cover. Caleb dismounted silently, pulled his rifle, and crept to a rocky rise overlooking the operation. 2 of the men were strangers. The third was not. Hank Dillon, Wade Sutter's foreman, the man who managed every aspect of the Double S operation and answered only to Wade himself. Caleb's blood went ice cold. Josie had been right. About all of it. The access, the knowledge, the motive. Wade Sutter was stealing Caleb's cattle using his own foreman. Probably had been for months, maybe longer. Every friendly visit, every concerned offer to buy the ranch, every smile and handshake, all of it calculated, all of it designed to weaken Caleb's position until selling became the only option. Caleb raised his rifle. He had a clean shot at Dylan. 50 yards, no wind. He could end this right now. His finger found the trigger. Evidence makes him a thief. A bullet makes you a murderer. Josie's voice, in his head, calm and certain, cutting through the rage like a blade through fog. He lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of choosing restraint over violence. The old Caleb, the cavalry Caleb, would have fired, would have solved the problem the way the territory had taught him problems were solved. But that Caleb hadn't had Josie Callahan's voice in his head. He pulled a small notebook from his saddlebag, the one Josie had given him for fence inspections, and wrote down everything. Date, time, location, number of cattle, descriptions of the 3 men, the brand on Dylan's horse that marked it as SS property. Then he waited, watched them finish, watched them repair the fence with wire that almost matched, watched them ride south toward Sutter's land, driving 15 of Caleb's cattle ahead of them. He rode back to the ranch at a pace that ate the distance. Josie was on the porch. She read his face before he'd even dismounted. "What happened?" "Caught 3 men driving my cattle through the south fence. One of them was Hank Dillon." Josie's eyes widened. Wade Sutter's foreman. His foreman. On my land. With my cattle. Right where you said the evidence pointed. Caleb dismounted and handed her the notebook. "I wrote down everything. Descriptions, time, location, brand on Dylan's horse." Josie took the notebook and opened it, scanning his notes. "This is good. This is exactly what we needed. With this and the fence documentation, we have enough to take to the territorial marshal." "I had a clean shot at Dylan." Josie looked up sharply. "But you didn't take it." "No." "Why not?" Caleb held her gaze. "Because you told me not to." Something moved across Josie's face. Not surprise. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that her words had reached him in a moment when nothing else could have. "You listened to me," she said quietly. "I listen to you more than you think." Elijah appeared from the barn, reading the situation the way he read weather and cattle and the moods of people he cared about. "Trouble?" "Wade Sutter's been stealing our cattle," Caleb said. "His foreman and 2 others. Josie's evidence was right." "So what do we do?" "We ride to town and bring the marshal back with us," Josie said. "Today. Before they have time to move the stolen cattle or cover their tracks." "All 3 of us?" Elijah asked. "I'll go," Caleb said. "You 2 stay here." "No." Josie's voice was absolute. "I'm coming. The documentation is mine. I can explain the evidence pattern better than anyone. It's a 2-hour ride each way. If Sutter finds out I caught his men, then the ranch needs protection. Elijah stays. We go." Josie was already moving toward the barn. "Saddle my horse." "Josie." She spun around. "If you tell me to stay here where it's safe, I swear on my father's grave, Caleb Maddox." "I was going to say ride Daisy. She's faster than the gray." Josie blinked. Then she almost smiled. "Fine. Daisy." They rode hard to Dry River. Josie kept pace without complaint, her body low over Daisy's neck, the notebook and evidence ledger secured in her saddlebag. Caleb rode beside her, stealing glances that he hoped she didn't notice. She noticed. "Eyes on the road, cowboy," she called over the hoofbeats. Marshal Tom Avery was a leathery man in his 50s who'd survived 2 decades of territorial law enforcement by being thorough, skeptical, and absolutely incorruptible. He listened to Caleb's account, then Josie's evidence presentation, without interrupting. Josie laid it out with the precision of a surgeon. The fence documentation, the wire analysis showing replacement at specific access points, the cattle count discrepancies mapped against Sutter's property boundaries, the inventory losses that correlated with seasonal hiring patterns, and finally, Caleb's eyewitness account of Dylan and two others driving cattle through a cut fence. Avery studied the evidence for a long time. "This is thorough work," he said. "Better than most lawmen would produce."
"Thank you," Josie said. "Who compiled all this?"
"I did. Miss Josephine Callahan." Avery looked at Caleb. "You're my partner," Caleb said. The word came out without hesitation, and he felt Josie's eyes on him, but didn't look away from the marshal. "Well, your partner's built a case that'll stand up before a territorial judge." Avery reached for his hat. "I'll ride out today with 2 deputies. We'll check the fence section first, then pay a visit to the Double S." "Wade'll deny everything," Caleb said. "Wade can deny all he wants. If those 15 head are on his property with your brand, the evidence speaks for itself." Avery paused at the door. "One thing. Stay away from Sutter. Both of you. Let the law handle this. I mean it." "We will," Josie said, with a glance at Caleb that dared him to argue. They rode back to Blackstone Creek slower than they'd come, the urgency spent. The afternoon heat was brutal, and both horses needed rest. Halfway home, Josie pulled her horse to a stop. "Caleb?" He reined in beside her. "Yeah?" "The trial period ends tomorrow." "I know." "I don't need it to end." Caleb's heart lurched. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've made my decision. I made it this morning in the barn, when you held my hands until they stopped shaking." Josie's voice was steady, but her eyes were luminous with something she was fighting to control. "I made it 3 days ago, when you apologized for being unkind, even though apologizing clearly cost you more than anything physical ever could. I made it the first night, when you paid for my meals without telling me, and I cried in my room because nobody has taken care of me without expecting something in return, since my father died." Caleb couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "I want to stay," Josie said. "Not because of the legal arrangement, not because I have nowhere else to go. I want to stay because this ranch deserves someone who cares about it. Because Elijah deserves to eat at a family table. Because that mare and her foal deserve proper care. And because you—" Her voice cracked, just barely. "Because you are a good man, Caleb Maddox. And I am tired of watching good men suffer alone because nobody taught them how to ask for help." Caleb sat on his horse in the middle of the New Mexico territory and felt every wall he'd ever built tremble. "I can't promise I'll be easy to live with," he said, his voice rough. "I'd be worried if you could." "I have nightmares, bad ones, about things I did in the cavalry that I can't talk about." "You don't have to talk about them. You just have to let me be there when you wake up." "I'm going to fight you on every decision for the first 6 months, because I don't know how to share control." "I'm going to fight you right back, because I don't know how to be quiet when I disagree." "People in town will talk. They'll call this a desperation match. They'll say you settled for a scarred cowboy with nothing to offer." "People in town have been calling me worthless since I arrived. I stopped caring about their opinions approximately the same day I started caring about yours." Caleb reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. Josie gripped back hard, like she was holding on to something she'd been reaching for her whole life. "Partners?" he asked. "Partners. We'll file the deed paperwork tomorrow. Your name beside mine." "And the wedding?" "Whenever you want. Reverend Pierce can do it simple. No fuss." "No fuss," Josie agreed. "Just honest." Just honest. They rode the rest of the way home, holding hands between their horses, which was impractical and uncomfortable, and neither of them let go. Elijah was standing on the porch when they arrived. He took one look at their faces and at their joined hands and turned away quickly, but not before Caleb saw something glisten on the old man's weathered cheek. "About damn time," Elijah muttered, and disappeared inside.
That evening, Josie cooked, and Caleb set the table for 3, and Elijah sat at the head like he'd always belonged there. They ate and talked, really talked, not the careful circling of strangers, but the honest exchange of people who'd chosen each other. "We should name the colt," Josie said, spreading butter on cornbread. "He needs a proper name." "Your delivery," Caleb said. "Your choice." Josie thought about it. "Chance." "Already got a horse named Chance." "Then we'll call yours something else." "You want to rename my horse?" "I want to name the foal after what he represents. Second chances. For him and his mother. For this ranch." She held Caleb's eyes. "For us." "Chance it is," Caleb said, and something settled in his chest, like a foundation stone locking into place. After dinner, Elijah retired to the bunkhouse early, claiming tiredness, but fooling nobody. Caleb and Josie sat on the porch. Mr. President, the orange tabby, appeared from wherever he spent his days and draped himself across Josie's lap with the entitled sprawl of genuine royalty. "Caleb, yeah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it without running or deflecting or making a joke. That limits my options considerably. I'm serious." "I know. Go ahead." Josie stroked Mr. President's fur in slow, rhythmic passes. "My stepfather didn't just treat me like furniture. When I was 16, he tried to arrange a marriage for me. To a business associate of his. A man of 53. He told me it was my duty to be useful, since I refused to be ornamental." Caleb's hands curled into fists on his knees. "My mother said nothing," Josie continued. "Not one word. She sat in her parlor and drank tea, while my stepfather explained that I should be grateful anyone was willing to take me. I was plain. I was difficult. I was too educated for my own good. This was the best I could hope for." "What happened?" "I packed a bag that night and walked to my aunt's house in the snow. 3 miles in January, wearing house shoes because I didn't have time to find my boots." Her voice was calm, almost clinical, but her hand had stopped moving on the cat's fur. "My aunt took me in, not out of love, out of obligation, and she reminded me of that obligation every day for 8 years. Josie, I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something." She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the 16-year-old girl walking through snow in house shoes, choosing to freeze rather than be sold. "I'm not here because I'm desperate. I'm not here because I have no options. I'm here because I looked at everything this territory offered and I chose this. I chose you. And I need you to believe that. Because if you spend this marriage waiting for me to realize I've made a mistake, I won't. You will. Because that's what you do. You wait for people to leave. You prepare for disappointment, like it's a weather event you can see coming." She leaned forward. "I'm asking you to stop. Not all at once, not perfectly, just stop assuming I'll be the next person who lets you down." Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd walked through snow at 16 and across a continent at 27, who saved horses and cured cattle and saw through him like he was made of glass. "I'll stop," he said, "or I'll try, which is the best I've got right now." "Trying is enough." Josie sat back. Mr. President readjusted himself with an affronted meow. "For now. Can I tell you something too?" "Please." Caleb stared at his hands, the scarred knuckles, the calluses,
the faint tremor that appeared sometimes when the memories got too close. In the cavalry, I did things. Orders I followed because that's what soldiers do. People got hurt. People who didn't deserve it. He swallowed hard. I left because I couldn't stomach it anymore.
The scar on my face, that was from a man I was supposed to consider an enemy, who was just trying to protect his family. He cut me, and his voice broke. I don't talk about this. You're talking about it now. Because you told me your worst thing, and I owe you mine. You don't owe me anything, Caleb, but I'm listening. I killed him. He was defending his home, and I killed him because that was the order. And every night since, I see his face. Caleb's hands were shaking again. That's why I have nightmares. That's what you'll hear through the walls. That's the man you're choosing to marry. Josie reached over and took his shaking hands, held them between hers the way he'd held hers in the barn that morning. Steady and firm and without judgment. You carried that alone for 7 years, she said. Longer. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. It's heavy. I know. That's why you need help with it. She squeezed his hands. What you did doesn't define you. What you chose to do afterward, leaving the violence, building something instead of destroying, trying to be better, that defines you. Caleb looked at their joined hands and felt something he hadn't felt since before the cavalry, since before his mother died, since before the world taught him that softness was a luxury he couldn't afford. Peace. Not happiness. Not absolution. Just the quiet, bone-deep peace of being known, truly known, the worst parts included, and not being turned away. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow what? Tomorrow we go to town. We file the deed. We set a date. Josie squeezed his hands one more time, then released them. Tomorrow, she agreed. She stood, lifting a protesting Mr. President, and paused at the door. Caleb? Yeah. I'm glad you didn't take that shot today. At Dylan. So am I. Not because of the legal consequences. Because you chose to be better than your worst impulse. That's the man I'm choosing. The one who puts down the rifle. She went inside. Caleb sat on the porch in the dark and listened to the sounds of his ranch. The cattle, the horses, the new colt shifting in the barn, the cat purring through an open window. His ranch. Their ranch. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and breathed. Tomorrow, everything would change. The deed, the partnership, the legal binding of two broken people who'd somehow found in each other the missing pieces. But tonight, sitting in the dark with the ghost of her hand still warm on his, Caleb Maddox let himself feel something he'd forbidden for 7 years. He let himself want this. Not just the ranch, not just the legal solution, not just the partnership. Her. He wanted her. The woman who talked to cats and saved horses and saw straight through his walls. The woman who'd walked through snow at 16 and never stopped walking until she found a place worth standing still. And for the first time in his life, wanting didn't feel like weakness. It felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. They filed the deed at 9 in the morning. Morrison, the same tired clerk in sleeve garters, pushed the papers across without ceremony. Caleb signed. Josie signed. The pen trembled in her hand, not from doubt, but from the weight of writing her name onto something permanent for the first time in her life. That's it, Morrison said, stamping the document. Blackstone Creek Ranch, joint ownership. Caleb Maddox and Josephine Callahan. Callahan for now, Josie said. Maddox, soon. Morrison's eyebrows went up. Caleb's went up higher. Josie tucked her copy into her bag without looking at either of them. Outside, Caleb caught her arm. You didn't have to say that. I know. We haven't even discussed, I know that too. Josie adjusted her bag on her shoulder.
But I've spent my whole life being a Callahan, and the Callahans have never given me anything except a dead father and a mother who chose a stranger over her own daughter. I'm ready for a different name. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he said the only honest thing he had. I'll try to make it a name worth carrying. You already have. They walked to Reverend Pierce's office. The Reverend was a young man, barely 30, with round spectacles and the patient disposition of someone accustomed to frontier marriages that were more practical than romantic. Saturday, Caleb told him. Simple. How simple? Vows and a signature. That's all we need. Reverend Pierce looked at Josie. Miss Callahan, is Saturday agreeable? Saturday is perfect. Witnesses? Elijah Pike, Caleb said, and Lola Reyes, if she's willing. She'll be willing, Josie said. She'll also bring food, reorganize the church, and tell the Reverend how to do his job. Reverend Pierce smiled. I'm acquainted with Mrs. Reyes. Saturday at 10. They stopped at Lola's on the way out of town. Josie went inside, while Caleb waited with the horses. And when she came back out, Lola was right behind her, gripping Josie's hand like she was sending a daughter off to war. You come to town if you need anything, Lola said. Anything at all. Any hour. I will. I mean it, Josefina. Lola only used the Spanish form when she was serious. That man is good, but he is wounded. And wounded men sometimes bite the hand that heals them. I know. I'll be careful. Don't be careful. Be strong. There's a difference. Lola released her hand and turned to Caleb with eyes that could cut steel. You hurt her. I'll ride out there myself and make you regret it. Entiendes? Yes, ma'am. Good. Saturday. I'll bring tamales. They rode home. Halfway there, Josie started laughing, sudden, bright, uncontrollable, and Caleb watched her with the helpless fascination of a man witnessing something rare. What's funny? Nothing. Everything. She wiped her eyes. I came to New Mexico with $2 and a crate of books. Now I own half a ranch, I'm getting married Saturday, and a Mexican grandmother just threatened my future husband on my behalf. She shook her head. A month ago, I was sleeping in my aunt's spare room, being reminded daily that I was a burden. Now I have a home. Her laughter faded into something quieter, something fragile. You have a home, Caleb confirmed. Say it again. You have a home, Josie, for as long as you want it. She didn't respond, but she didn't need to. The way she sat straighter in the saddle said everything. They reached Blackstone Creek to find Elijah standing at the gate with his rifle in one hand and a grim expression that wiped the softness off the morning like a slap. We got trouble, Elijah said. What kind? The kind with a badge. Elijah jerked his head toward the house. Marshal Avery's inside. He's been here an hour. Wouldn't tell me what it's about. Said he'd wait for you. Caleb dismounted fast. Josie was right behind him. Inside, Avery sat at the kitchen table, hat off, coffee untouched. His face told Caleb everything before his mouth did. Recovered your cattle, Avery said. 12 of the 15 head. Found them on Double S land with your brand, just like you said. And Dylan? Arrested. He's in the territorial jail in Santa Fe. Confessed within the hour. Gave up the whole operation. Avery paused, looked at his hands. Here's where it gets complicated. Caleb felt Josie tense beside him. Dylan swears Wade Sutter knew nothing about the theft. Says he was running the operation on his own. skimming cattle from several ranches and selling them through a contact in El Paso. That's a lie, Caleb said. Maybe. Probably. But Dylan's the only witness, and he's swearing under oath that Sutter was uninvolved. Without corroboration, I can't touch Wade. He's protecting his boss, Josie said. Sutter's probably paying him to take the fall. Almost certainly. Avery met her eyes. But almost certainly isn't evidence, Miss Callahan. I need proof. Something that ties Sutter directly to the stolen cattle or the conspiracy. What about my documentation? Josie asked. The fence analysis, the access patterns, the correlation with Sutter's property. Circumstantial. A good lawyer would shred it, and Sutter can afford a very good lawyer. Caleb's fist hit the table, hard enough to rattle the coffee cup. So he gets away with it. For now, Avery stood. I'm not done, Maddox. I'll keep investigating, but I wanted you to know where things stand so you're not blindsided. And if Sutter retaliates? He won't. Not with a federal investigation open. He's too smart for that. Avery put on his hat. But watch your back anyway. Smart men do stupid things when they feel cornered. Avery left. The house was silent. He'll come, Caleb said quietly. Not with guns. Wade's smarter than that. He'll come with lawyers, with political pressure, with whatever it takes to make us sell. Then we don't sell, Josie said. We don't bend. We don't break. We build this ranch into something so solid that no amount of pressure can crack it. You make it sound simple. I make it sound necessary. Josie picked up Avery's untouched coffee and poured it out. Simple has nothing to do with it. Elijah appeared in the doorway. Heard everything. Course you did, Caleb muttered. What's the play? We prepare, Josie said, answering before Caleb could. Better security, better documentation, better relationships with every other rancher in the territory, so that if Sutter tries to isolate us, he fails. She turned to Caleb. And we get married on Saturday, because that's what we planned, and I refuse to let Wade Sutter rearrange one more thing in our lives. Yes, ma'am, Caleb said, and for the first time, the words didn't feel like concession. They felt like conviction. The next 2 days blurred together. Caleb and Elijah reinforced fence lines, while Josie rode to neighboring ranches, alone, despite Caleb's protest, introducing herself, sharing information about the rustling operation, building the network of allies she'd described. She came back each evening with reports that stunned him. The Garza Ranch to the east had lost cattle too. The Whitfield spread to the north had found cut fences. 3 other operations had noticed inventory discrepancies. All of them bordered or neighbored Wade Sutter's SS. He's been doing this for years, Josie said, spreading a hand-drawn map across the table. Not just us. Everyone. Small amounts, irregular timing, just enough to weaken each operation without triggering a major investigation. Until now, Caleb said. Until now, because none of them were tracking it properly. None of them were talking to each other. Josie tapped the map. I've organized a meeting, Sunday after the wedding. Every affected rancher. We pool our evidence, present a unified case to Avery, and Wade Sutter faces a conspiracy charge instead of a single foreman taking the blame. Caleb stared at her. You did all this in 2 days? I did all this in 2 afternoons. Mornings were for the cattle treatments. Elijah, who'd been listening from his chair by the fire, let out a low whistle. Son, if you don't marry this woman on Saturday, I will. You're 60 years old, and she'd still be getting the better deal. Saturday came. Caleb put on his only suit and stood in front of the small mirror in his bedroom, staring at the scar on his face and the shadows under his eyes, and the expression of a man about to jump off a cliff and hoping there was water below. A knock on his door. Elijah, dressed in clean clothes Caleb had never seen before. Pressed shirt, dark vest,
boots polished to a gleam.
"Where did those come from?" Caleb asked.
I own nice things. I just never had occasion to wear them. Elijah straightened his collar. You ready? No. Good. If you were ready, I'd worry. Only fools walk into marriage without fear. Elijah put his hand on Caleb's shoulder, a rare physical gesture from a man who'd learned young that touch could be taken away without warning. Your mother would be proud of you. Caleb's throat closed. She'd have loved Josie, Elijah continued. Any woman who talks to cats and delivers foals and makes a stubborn man admit he needs help, that's a woman worth keeping. I know, then go keep her. They rode to town in the wagon. Josie was at Lola's, getting ready. Caleb paced outside the boarding house like a man awaiting sentencing until Elijah told him to stop wearing a groove in the porch. The door opened. Josie stood there in a dress the color of sage, green-gray that matched her eyes exactly. It was simple, well-made, not fancy, with a white collar and buttons up the front. Her hair was down for the first time since he'd known her, falling past her shoulders in waves of reddish-brown that caught the light. She was carrying a small bundle of desert wildflowers that Lola must have gathered that morning. And she was looking at Caleb with an expression that stripped every defense he'd ever built and left him standing there with nothing but the truth. You look, he started. If you say nice, I'll reconsider this entire arrangement, Josie said. I was going to say, you look like the reason I survived the last 7 years. Josie's eyes went bright. She blinked hard. Lola, standing behind her, pressed a handkerchief to her own face and muttered something in Spanish that sounded like a prayer. That'll do, Josie said softly. That'll do fine. Reverend Pierce married them in his small office with Elijah and Lola as witnesses. The vows were standard. The ceremony was brief. But when Caleb took Josie's hands and said, I do, his voice didn't waver. And when Josie said it back, her grip on his hands tightened, like she was anchoring herself to something she'd never let go. You may kiss the bride, Pierce said. Caleb looked at Josie. She looked at him. The whole world contracted to the space between them. He kissed her. Gentle, careful, like she was something precious, and he was a man with rough hands who'd forgotten how to be tender. Josie kissed him back, and it wasn't careful at all. It was fierce and certain, and full of everything she'd been holding back for 2 weeks. So Caleb Maddox, scarred, haunted, terrified of tenderness, lifted Josie Callahan Maddox off her feet and carried her through the door of the house he built alone and would never have to live in alone again. She was lighter than he expected and stronger than he realized, and when he set her down, she didn't step away. She stayed close, her hands on his chest, her face tilted up to his. This is real now, she said. It's been real since the barn, Caleb said. Since you saved that foal and I held your hands. I know, but now it's legal and real, which means you can't take it back. I wouldn't. Promise me. I promise. No taking it back. No running. No walls. He cupped her face in his rough hands, and she leaned into the touch like it was water in the desert. I'm here, Josie. For all of it. That night they shared a bed as husband and wife, not with the nervous formality of strangers, but with the quiet trust of two people who'd already shown each other their worst and chosen to stay. Caleb woke at 3 a.m. from the nightmare. The same one. The man's face, the knife, the order, the terrible final moment. He sat up gasping, drenched in sweat, his hands reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Josie was awake instantly. Not startled, not frightened, just present. I'm here, she said. You're home. You're safe. I killed him, Caleb choked. I can still see. I know. She put her arms around him and held on. Not trying to fix it, not offering platitudes, just holding him while the nightmare receded
and reality reassembled itself. "It doesn't stop," he whispered. "It might not ever stop, but you don't face it alone anymore." He pressed his face against her shoulder and breathed. She smelled like soap and desert sage and something warm and alive and his. "Go back to sleep," Josie said.
I'll stay awake. You don't have to. I want to. She stroked his hair with fingers that delivered foals and cured cattle and held his shaking hands in barns at dawn. "Sleep, Caleb. I've got watch." He slept, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the nightmare didn't come back. The meeting on Sunday changed everything. 8 ranchers crowded into the Blackstone Creek main room. Josie stood at the head of the table with her maps, her evidence logs, her meticulous documentation of every cut fence and missing animal across 5 properties. She presented for 40 minutes. No one interrupted. By the end, even the most skeptical rancher, a hard-bitten old Texan named Crawford, who'd openly scoffed at a woman running a meeting, was leaning forward, studying the evidence with narrowed eyes. "This is solid work," Crawford said grudgingly. "Better than solid. This is a federal case." "That's exactly what it is," Josie said. With 8 ranches presenting unified evidence of systematic theft, Marshal Avery has grounds for a conspiracy investigation. Dylan's confession covers the mechanics. Our documentation covers the scope. Together, they point to one man with the means, motive, and opportunity to orchestrate all of it. "Wade Sutter," Crawford said. "Wade Sutter." The room went quiet. Then Garza, the rancher to the east, stood. "I'm in. Whatever you need. Testimony, records, access to my property for investigation. Wade Sutter's been bleeding us dry for years, and I'm done being quiet about it." One by one, every rancher in the room agreed. Josie organized them with the same precision she applied to everything, assigning evidence-gathering tasks, coordinating with Avery's office, building a case so airtight that even Sutter's expensive lawyers couldn't crack it. Caleb watched his wife command a room full of territorial ranchers and felt something beyond pride. He felt awe, not the distant, reverential kind, the close, personal kind that comes from watching someone you love become exactly who they were meant to be. "Your wife's a force of nature," Crawford told Caleb afterward, shaking his hand at the door. "I'm aware." "You don't deserve her." "I'm aware of that too." Crawford laughed, a rusty, surprised sound, and rode off. The investigation took 3 weeks. Marshal Avery, armed with evidence from 8 properties, obtained a territorial warrant and searched the Double S. They found falsified cattle records, branded hides from stolen animals, and a ledger in Wade Sutter's own handwriting documenting payments to Dylan and others. Wade was arrested on a Tuesday morning. Caleb heard about it from Avery himself, who rode out to Blackstone Creek with the news. "It's done," Avery said. "Sutter's in custody. Territorial judge will hear the case next month. But with the evidence your wife compiled, conviction is a certainty." "My wife compiled," Caleb repeated. "That woman should have been a lawyer, or a marshal, or both." Avery tipped his hat. "You're lucky, Maddox. Don't I know it?" After Avery left, Caleb found Josie in the barn, checking on Chance, the colt, who was growing fast and already showing his mother's spirit. "Sutter's arrested," Caleb said. Josie's hands paused on the colt's neck. "Good. That's all? Good? What would you like me to say?" "I don't know. Something about how you single-handedly organized 8 ranches, built a federal case, and brought down the most powerful man in the territory?" "I didn't single-handedly do anything. The ranchers provided the evidence. Avery executed the warrant. Dylan's confession opened the door." Josie resumed grooming the colt.
I just organized the information. You did a hell of a lot more than that. Caleb, she looked at him. I didn't come here to be a hero. I came here to build a life. The investigation was necessary to protect our ranch. I'm glad it's over. Now I'd like to focus on things that matter more. Like what? Like the fact that we need to expand the herd before winter. Like the fact that Elijah's knees are getting worse, and he needs help he's too proud to ask for. Like the fact that I'm 3 weeks late, and I think I might be pregnant. Caleb stopped breathing. You, what? I'm not certain. It's early, but the signs are consistent. Josie's voice was clinical, but her hand on the colt's neck had gone still. I wanted to wait until I was sure before telling you, but since we're having a moment of honesty... Caleb crossed the barn in 3 strides, took her face in his hands, and kissed her so hard they both staggered. Is that a positive reaction? Josie managed when they broke apart. That's a yes. That's a yes. His hands were shaking again, but this time he didn't care. Josie, are you happy about it? Terrified, she said. And yes, incredibly, impossibly happy. He pulled her against his chest and held her. This woman who'd arrived in Dry River with $2 and a crate of books. Who'd been called worthless and unwanted and too old and too much. This woman who'd cured his cattle and saved his horse and organized his neighbors and brought down his enemy and stolen his heart so completely that he couldn't remember what it felt like to beat without her. I love you, he said into her hair. I know. I'm going to say it every day. I know that too. And I'm going to be terrified every day that something will take this away. Josie pulled back enough to look at his face. Something might. Life doesn't promise safety, Caleb. But I promise you this. Whatever comes, we face it together. No running, no walls, no carrying it alone. Together, he said. Always. From his stall, Chance whinnied, impatient, demanding, full of the entitled confidence of a creature who'd been saved by steady hands and had no intention of ever being quiet about it. Your son's hungry, Josie said. My son is a horse. Your son is a horse who was born in your barn, delivered by your wife, and named after what this family is built on. Feed him. Caleb fed the horse. Then he fed the chickens. Then he walked to the bunkhouse and told Elijah. The old man sat down heavily on his cot, pressed both hands over his face, and didn't speak for a full minute. Elijah? I'm fine. His voice was thick. Just give me a minute. You're crying. I am not crying. I have dust in my eyes. Both eyes? It's a dusty bunkhouse. Elijah dropped his hands. His cheeks were wet, and he was smiling wider than Caleb had ever seen. A baby. A baby. In this house, on this land. Elijah stood and put both hands on Caleb's shoulders. Your mother would have... He couldn't finish. She would have... I know, Caleb said. I know she would. They stood there, 2 men who'd built their lives around the principle that showing emotion was dangerous, and let themselves feel the dangerous thing fully. Joy. Unguarded, unreserved, terrifying joy. That evening, Caleb sat on the porch with the harmonica Josie had given him. He played the river song, his mother's song, and this time the notes came cleaner, surer, like muscle memory waking up after a long sleep. Josie came out and sat beside him. Mr. President materialized from the darkness and claimed her lap. From the bunkhouse, Caleb could see the glow of Elijah's lamp and knew the old man was awake, listening. Play it again, Josie said. So he did. He played for his wife and his unborn child, and the old man in the bunkhouse, and the colt in the barn, and the ranch that had saved his life, and the woman who'd saved everything else. The music drifted out over Blackstone Creek, over the fences Josie had helped him mend, over the pastures where healthy cattle grazed, over the land that bore both their names. It carried across the desert the way stories carry, far and wide, and into the hearts of anyone willing to listen. Josie leaned her head against his shoulder. Caleb. Thank you for not giving up. On the ranch? On yourself. He set down the harmonica and put his arm around her. She fit against him like she'd always been there, like the 7 years of solitude had just been the long, lonely prelude to this exact moment. They gave me 30 days to find a wife, Caleb said. I found something better. What's that? A reason to stop surviving and start living. Josie took his hand and pressed it against her belly, where their future was already growing, already becoming, already proof that two broken people could build something whole. That's the best thing you've ever said to me, she whispered. Give me time. I'm just getting started. She laughed. He held her closer. Mr. President purred. And somewhere in the bunkhouse, Elijah Pike smiled in the lamplight. And finally, after 60 years of carrying his own loneliness, let himself believe that the family he'd lost so long ago had found its way back to him in the most unexpected form. The night settled over Blackstone Creek Ranch, over the house that was finally a home, over the land that was finally shared, over the people who had finally, against every odd and every fear, chosen each other. And the music lingered long after the harmonica went silent, because some songs don't need instruments to keep playing. They just need two people brave enough to listen. The end. But not really, because for Caleb and Josie Maddox, the end of their beginning was just the start of everything that mattered. And everything that mattered started the day a scarred cowboy opened his gate to a woman the world called worthless, and she walked through it, carrying nothing but books and courage and a love fierce enough to save them both.